You're such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's case is about someone who was murdered in a high heel homicide. Now, with one odd murder weapon, the only way to understand this crime was to be there. But we would receive the closest thing yet, an aggressive and emotional reenactment. If you don't know, it's my absolute passion to tell these stories. I mean, no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if that's something you would like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2013 in Texas, and Stefan Anderson lived in Houston. He was actually a biochemistry professor at the University of Houston for the past 4 years. He also lived in a high-rise apartment called Park Lane. It was very luxury, but Stephen had actually been born in Sweden to a family which had a father who was abusive to everybody, but he ended up being able to escape using his intelligence because he moved to Dallas, Texas in his 20s, and he was earning his PhD to become a researcher. He began working at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. There he would identify and clone 2 genes encoding enzymes that converted testosterone to be more potent in the prostate. And I didn't understand that either, but basically this was a huge breakthrough noticed by so many, and in fact noticed by a huge pharmaceutical company called Merck. They wanted to hire him to work in their own facilities to continue his work, and from what he found, they wanted to work towards developing treatments for alopecia, prostate cancer, and prostate gland enlargement. 10 years later, he was still working in the same research. He was also now a US citizen, and in his 30s, he did marry for a very short period of time, but it ended up not working out. So by 2013, he was a 59-year-old talented biochemist at the university's Center for Nuclear Receptors and Cell Signaling. He was considered an expert in female hormones and prostate cancer. Now, he spent most of his time working and had very little space for friends or relationships. Really, coworkers were the only ones he would actually hang out with or even really see, and everyone knew him as a man who preferred the company of his research and a man who was brilliant. In his personal life, he appeared to be a gentleman. He was mild-mannered and passive, and he found socialization stressful and also had to take antidepressants for his depression, his mental health issues, but he gave his all to what he was passionate about, and that was his work, his research. Since he had no dependents, though, he was making a very good salary, meaning that he could afford a more luxury life. So he went and he applied for these apartments at Park Lane, and he actually got one on the 18th floor. This was known to be very high-end in Houston's theater district. But on June 9th, a 911 call would be placed from inside of his apartment around 3:41 a.m. And nearly 20 minutes later, an ambulance and police were at the scene, and they found a body in the hallway between the entryway and the kitchen, and there was blood everywhere. The man was unrecognizable, lying on his back with his hands above his head, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. This was a frantic room, and not just because paramedics were trying to save a life, but because a girl was in the room, sobbing hysterically. Officers ultimately had to point a gun at her and tell her to get on the ground to get her to stop so they could actually speak to her. She was then taken to the station so that they could talk to her more, try to calm her down, and understand what she was saying and why there was a deceased man in the room with her. Meanwhile, the 911 call audio was obtained so they could hear what actually had happened or who had called this in, and it was a woman on the other line. It appeared to be the same voice of the woman that they had in custody, but they could not be sure. But she was just as hysterical on the phone as she was in person with them. But they heard her say that she had been attacked by Stefan Anderson. She then said that he was bleeding and was going to die if they didn't come and help.
So you reporting an assault, ma'am?
Yes, he assaulted me. I hit him with my shoe and he's bleeding. He said he beat me up.
And when investigators arrived at the scene, there was so much trauma to who they now knew was Stefan Anderson lying on the floor that they believed that it was a gunshot wound at close proximity. As Dr. Jennifer Ross was performing the autopsy, they got the woman in their custody to calm down a little bit. And this woman would be identified as 45-year-old Anna Trujillo. And she was confused, saying that she believed that there were officers there to help her, not to arrest her. She didn't know why she was down at the station.
He just yelled at me and took his gun out and he told me to get down on the ground. I thought they were there to help us. The millions of officers showed up and where was the ambulance?
Meanwhile, Dr. Jennifer Ross declared that Stefan's cause of death wasn't actually a gunshot wound. It was blunt force trauma to the head and the face. There were 25 contusions and scratches and lacerations to his face. But the murder weapon? Well, since that wasn't a gun, they weren't really sure what could have done this. But that would be the most baffling part. Anna had been questioned at the police station for 3 hours when she started to talk, and she said that the night of the murder, they had been hanging out together, her and Stefan. They had gone down to a local bar. They were drinking all night. They were happy, having fun, and then they were going back to the apartment together. And that is when Anna claimed that Stefan began to get really mad. He brought up the fact that a man had actually bought her a drink at the bar, and he was very jealous, and she said they began to argue after that. You see, although Stefan wasn't a relationship man, he was a bachelor most of his life, Anna and Stefan were said not to actually just be friends with benefits or a one-night stand. They had met earlier that year, only a few months prior, and they were at Stefan's apartment. Apparently, Anna was living with another man in the apartment when they had met in the lobby, and Stefan asked her out for drinks, and she said yes. After that, they were pretty much inseparable, and they would like to go out to parties and hang out with friends all the time together. It was the first time in a long time Stefan had shown interest in something other than his work, and so people were happy for him. He seemed very happy, but at the same time, some of his friends who were really just his coworkers, the people who wanted, to hang out with him more but didn't really get to see him much, were kind of worried only about the fact that Anna had seemed to come from a whole line of failed relationships, and she was also much younger than him. But Stefan said that this didn't bother him at all. Now he was deceased and Anna was in custody, and it turned out when investigators were first called to the scene, they couldn't locate the apartment. They did not know exactly where to go, and they were called by dispatch to these apartment buildings because of an assault that was in progress. That was what it was labeled as, and so they were told it was apartment 1801. They arrived, they got to the 18th floor, and they realized that apartments weren't labeled that way. They were 18A, 18B, 18C, and so on. And so they were standing in the hallway, listening, trying to figure out where this was coming from, if it was still happening, and how to get to it as quickly as possible. And as they were listening for a clue, Officer Bowie heard a woman moaning behind the door of 18B. Not the moans you're thinking of, but just kind of like she was hurt. And so immediately he knocked on the door. He tried to call out for anybody inside, and that is when the door cracked open and a woman would look through the crack at him. They asked her if she had called 911, and she answered with a slurred yes. So when Officer Bowie kind of asked her what was wrong, she simply opened the door a crack, and as she did so, they noticed the woman was covered in blood. She had it on her forehead, her cheeks, her chin. But as the door opened even wider, it wasn't just a little bit. It wasn't drops of blood like she was wounded. It was blood covering her body and her clothes. The officers were worried that she was hurt, but she assured them that she wasn't. She began to get hysterical at this point, saying that he was holding her down and wouldn't let her go. And when they asked who she was talking about, that is when she fully opened the door and let them inside. Now, as Officer Bowie walked in just a little bit further, that is when they found the body. At this point, the woman was crying. He was holding me. He wouldn't let me go. I told him, Stefan, please, please let me go. The woman asked Officer Bowie to give him CPR, saying that she had tried and failed, but Officer Bowie didn't even need to, because looking around, he knew there was no way Stefan had survived this. There was far too much blood already dried on the white carpet, and he was gone. Now Anna was being questioned and was asked how she had a dead man in her presence when officers arrived. And she appeared to be hungover at this point. She ended up rambling about a lot of different men in her life that were obsessed with her, and that she was often too loving, too caring, and she was hugging herself while talking softly. When she finally got to the point of Stefan, she ended up saying that she had told Stefan that she needed a break from him, that she was going to go back to her home the next day where her family was, and was going to take a break. And that is when he got angry, telling her that she was not allowed to leave, and his face got really red. He got infuriated, and then she said he went towards her, telling her she was not going to leave him. Anna claimed that Stefan got physical, grabbing her as soon as they walked in the apartment door and wrestling her, throwing her over a couch and holding her against the wall. She got away only for Stefan to jump on top of her, and she said she couldn't breathe. She tried telling him this, and Stefan was just growling at her.
All of a sudden, he just turns around and has a complete different look on him. Angry. He starts to pull me. I still have my shoes on. So he grabs me by my hands. He bangs me against the wall. He kept saying that I was going to leave him. I wasn't coming back. He's screaming and yelling and ranting, and just, I saw the way you were looking at those guys. When he threw me over that couch and I fell completely backwards and my head hit, I saw black.
Did you feel like your life was in danger at that point?
Yes.
She said she was begging him to let her go, and she was thrusting about, trying to get him off of her. And finally, Stefan did slip and he fell off of her. And that is when she got on top of him and pushed him down, trying to keep him away from her. When he would not stop, when he would not calm down, she said she reached for the only thing that she could find near her, and that was the heels she was still wearing. This was size 9, 5.5-inch blue velvet stiletto heels, and she began to hit him over the head.
And I reached over and I found the shoe, and he was on top of me, and I was just hitting him with the shoe however I could. And I was going, please get off of me. And I was just crying. I was like, please. And he was just like laughing. It didn't even seem like it was fazing him.
She said after she had hit him a couple of times, she didn't know where the blood was coming from. She didn't think she hurt him or hit him that hard until she saw the blood on her hands. She went on to hit him 25 times, and Anna was explaining that Stefan was a controlling and abusive man, and she had no other option than to save herself with the only thing she had nearby. That when he was drinking, he got mean, and he would stop for a while. He would then relapse, and it would get even worse. He would do so when he felt lonely and fell into self-destructive behavior. And Anna said she just couldn't deal with it anymore. But she also said that Stefan was like many of her male friends who ended up becoming obsessed with her, wanting the friendship to turn into more and wanting to marry her. She explained that she started to feel the same for Stefan, but did not want to have sex with him because it was like sleeping with her grandfather. Yet he had asked her to marry him, and she said that she said yes. And that is why they were out that night at bar 5015, the night of the murder, because they were celebrating being engaged. She said everything was going great, but then Stefan wanted to go home, and she tried to stay, but ultimately they left together, and within the next few hours, Stefan would be deceased. Now, during the interview, she believed Stefan was still alive. Then she realized suddenly that they were at the homicide department and asked if he was dead. When she was told that he was dead, she immediately said he assaulted her and showed no emotion.
And he grabbed me, and he wouldn't let me go, and he started wrestling with me. And then he got on top of me, and I couldn't breathe, and I was suffocating.
At this point, Anna was being held on a $100,000 bond, and staff at the apartment complex said that they did not believe she lived there with him. She would often come over, and she was there that night. But they also had another story to tell, because about 6 months prior to the murder in January or February of that year, they had had lots of complaints about Anna's behavior. And when Stefan heard about this, he told her that she could no longer come and, visit him, come and stay with him, and just come in whenever she wanted, and he ended up changing the locks on the door. Inside the 18th floor apartment, forensic had found blood stains on the wall. This was blood spatter, and this was very close to the ground, and this made them believe that Stefan was actually on his back when he was hit. Investigators then found Anna's purse, which contained a tarot card deck and it was open to the death card. The tarot book she was reading was also open to a page explaining card number 13 and had an illustration of a skeleton on horseback holding a sickle and wearing a hooded cape. She had also admitted to borrowing around $7,000 from Stefan while dating him, and at this point the murder weapon was found. The blue stiletto heel was covered in blood with Stefan's hair wrapped around it. Then investigators found a witness, the last person to really see him alive, because this was a woman named Rosemary Gomez, who was a cab driver who came forward saying that she gave them a ride home from the bars that night. Now, she said that she had a feeling that something horrible was going to happen, and she ended up turning to Stefan before he got out of the car and telling him that he needed to be careful. This was because she said the friend with Stefan was not in her right mind, but Stefan then squeezed her hand and told her that everything was going to be okay. Rosemary said that Anna was drunk, she was cursing, she was acting belligerent towards Stefan in the cab and swearing, and she continued to do so when they got to the apartment and she got out of the car. And Rosemary said that she wanted to take Stefan somewhere else, that she was afraid for him, but he told her that he would be fine. And so they prayed together before he got out.
I was just taking a prayer like I normally do.
She tells him, go get a cab. You know? I said, are you a man or a mouse? Come on, dude. I said, what are you doing letting her talk to you like that?
But you had a funny feeling that something was going to happen.
He squeezed my hand and he said, no, I'll be okay. And I told him, I said, I just have a feeling something's going to happen.
Stefan's friends then claimed that Stefan did drink, but it wasn't him who was the mean drunk. It was Anna. They said that he was never abusive or violent to anyone, and that the two of them weren't engaged. Stefan had actually ended the relationship. They said that after the apartment complex had gotten complaints about Anna, he actually ended up sending her back home to Mexico for a while. He paid for the trip, but he wanted the relationship to be over after that. His friends said he was at the bar 5015 when she had shown up because she knew he frequented that bar. And they said he was very kind to her, even though she showed up out of nowhere and he didn't really want to talk to her. And then they were mostly surprised when they left together, but they were also both drunk at the time. At this point, Anna did quite a few interviews as the media roared about the girl who killed her boyfriend with a stiletto heel. She sobbed as she explained that everybody believed that she did this on purpose and that none of us know how we would deal with a situation like this until we're in it. As she claimed self-defense, though, the officers who had found Stefan weren't so sure. Ultimately, this would be up to the jury, though. And so during her trial on March 31st of 2014, photos were shown of what Anna looked like when they brought her down to the station. They had interviewed her and then they took her down for photographs, asking her to remove her top layers after they got pictures of them. And when the photos were displayed, there was blood all over the inside of her jeans as though she had been straddling him. But when the clothes were off, everybody noticed that there was no scratches or bruises or self-defense marks on her body at all, whereas Stefan had many wounds on his arms and his palms. Stefan's ex-wife then came forward to say that Stefan had never verbally or physically abused her. He instilled confidence in her. He uplifted her. He supported her in so many ways that it wasn't in his nature to be demeaning. His niece then came forward to say that she was 110% sure Stefan was never violent with Anna, that he was not depressed, he was not angry with her. He was happy when he was with her, and then he just wanted it to be over, but he wouldn't have hurt her to make it so it was over. The prosecution then called witnesses, one being Officer Bowie, who had found Stefan that day, and he testified that the crying he saw Anna doing when he opened the door were only crocodile tears. He didn't actually see any tears covering her face, only sobbing sounds. Witnesses from her past were brought in next, all to discuss her behavior. One ex-boyfriend claimed that Anna had bit him. A security guard said that she drunkenly attacked him one time. And a neighbor said that they had found her drunk in their bathroom without asking to come in.
Brian Goodney, a former friend, remembers a startling attack.
Walk her to the door, turn around to open the door, and get hit on the back of the head with a candlestick.
That was the last thing you remembered.
She knocked me out.
She had also been arrested for public intoxication and a DWI, but those who knew Stefan and knew what he did for Anna knew that he did buy her things very often. In fact, he bought her a $1,500 Kristen Louis Vuitton heel but she had used her less than $100 pair of heels to kill him. But when they x-rayed the stilettos as the murder weapon, they found that the heel and the sole were both made of steel, so this ended up looking more like an ice hammer with a crooked handle than just a regular heel. Anna's defense attorney was a man named Jack Carroll, who knew she had no money to pay him, but also knew that she would soon, with all of the TV producers calling her for rights to her story. He truly believed, though, that she was innocent. Jack's opening statement was, "There was a life and death struggle that night. The man was drunk and went crazy. He slammed her against the wall. She couldn't breathe. He was suffocating her. She did the only thing she could do, take a weapon of her disposal, which was a shoe, and started clobbering him with it." The prosecutor, Jordan, then began acting out a scene to prove that the defense was wrong. He used a mannequin that he climbed on top of, then had a stiletto in his hand, the actual other stiletto to the murder weapon, and he ended up pretending to hit it over the mannequin's head. At the same time he was doing this, a forensic expert was explaining that the blood on the walls could have only been there if she continued to beat him when he was already down. Yet the defense attorney Jack got on top of the mannequin himself, and he pretended to do CPR, saying that possibly the blood came from her trying to wake him up, from slapping him, from doing CPR. And the forensic expert said yes, this could have occurred, and that is when they listened to the 911 call where the operator was telling Anna how to do CPR, and she was saying, "Breathe, Stefan, breathe," on the other line. Dr. Jennifer Ross had listed Stefan's death as blunt force trauma to the head, although when she was in court, she said it was possible that his death was triggered by stress and an adrenaline rush which caused a heart attack. Yet when footage was shown during this trial of Stefan and Anna being at the bar that night, Anna randomly began laughing in her seat in the courtroom. A pathologist was then brought in to testify that all of Stefan's injuries were superficial and non-fatal, that the death was ultimately due to heart failure, and he was taking heart medications for issues he had. The prosecutor claimed that the entire investigation, Anna was in Anna's world, talking about her past and other men more than the man she had just killed. She had blamed them all for her bad life, her dad, her husband, her lovers, her friends, and Jordan said, because in Anna's world, it has nothing to do with the fact that you hit somebody 25 times about the face that caused the death. It's someone else's fault. I asked for a guilty verdict because we live in Texas, not in Anna's world. On April 8th, after 2 hours of deliberation, Anna was found guilty, and her attorney was shocked, believing that the jury was in a good mood. He thought he had it in the bag.
Mr. Trujillo, please stand. We, the jury, find the defendant, Anna Trujillo, also known as Anna Fox, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment, signed foreman of the jury.
But the woman they were convicting, well, she was born in Mexico and raised in Waco, Texas, born to a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, not much is known about her childhood except for the fact that she often took care of her siblings when she was younger, and at only 19, she was married for the first time. They went on to have 2 children together, but they would divorce shortly after. Her ex would end up raising the kids, so 2 years later, she had moved to Houston, and she had gotten to be the executive at Coca-Cola, and she had married once again. She was doing well for herself, but that didn't last long, and they ended up being divorced as well. For a while, she was working as a TV host, going on air as Anna Fox and interviewing people with her bubbly personality.
Thank you for joining me and enjoying ourselves.
Sometimes she would also work as a massage therapist to make money when she needed to, but a lot of the times she didn't because men would pay her. She was known by her friends to be outgoing, the life of the party, always willing to dance and drink. She often talked about occult powers and that she believed in that practice, and she slowly began getting more into drugs and was often dating and moving in with these men she had just met because they would take care of her. Though most of these men would describe her as unhinged and violent when she was drinking, and her friends said that she was crazy, but a fun-loving kind of crazy.
Jim Carroll met her at the Lawndale Hotel, where they both once lived.
What was she like? She laughed a lot. I mean, she was really cool. She just talked about spirituality and the pyramids and ghosts and the tarot. She brought several men to the hotel, and finally I started talking to her. I said, look, you know, we can't have none of that business going on here.
And how many men would you estimate this was?
4 to 6 men. One of them was the professor.
One neighbor did come forward, though, to say that he was once joking around with Anna, just talking to her. But Anna had said that if anyone messed with her, she would use her heel to get them.
When I first met Anna, she was very, very articulate, very nice, and all this. But in between her dates, she'd come downstairs, hang out with me, because I managed the place. And we just have all these talks. You know, we were intimate without being intimate, if you know what I mean.
Right.
She dated too much. I didn't want to be on her list. No, one time she had called me in a panic, asked me to come upstairs. I thought there was a fire or something. And I ran upstairs, and she lost her little voodoo doll. She carries this little voodoo doll around with her.
Oh, Lord.
And, yeah. And when I went up there, there were wine bottles laying on the floor, and her bed was a mess, and then she had, she had urinated in the bed. And I told her, look, you're going to be responsible for cleaning this up, not me. Our housekeeping is not good for this. She was on probation for a DWI and going to counseling for her drinking.
Really?
As a matter of fact, she had gotten in trouble for not going to, abiding by the rules of her probation. But because of some of the people she worked with on the side and her little massage business that wasn't licensed, she knew a lot of lawyers and things like that, people in that area. I was floored because when this news broke, it was breaking news one night, and they didn't release the names. They said we have just discovered a woman has killed a guy with a shoe. And I immediately thought Anna. So I called some of the local stations. I said, please call me. Let me know if this was Anna Fox. That's how she went by as Anna Fox and Anna Trujillo. And sure enough, it was her. I saw it the next morning, and it was Anna.
Wow.
She had told me on two different occasions. One of them was after she said that somebody had accosted her downtown. And I told Anna, look, I'm kind of worried about you, bringing these different guys into the establishment, into my place. And, everybody that comes in is supposed to leave an ID, a copy of their ID. And she goes, don't worry. If anybody ever blankety blanks with me, I'm going to get them with this in the blankety blank eye. And she pulled off her shoe, and it was a black shoe with some gold and silver designs on it. And it was a stiletto, but it was like an ice pick. It was gray, and it come to a point on the heel. And I said, because I told her, look, I've got a couple knives. Take a knife with you or take some pepper spray. She goes, no, I've got this if they ever mess with me.
But no one could describe just how crazy she could get because they hadn't yet seen it, not to the full capacity, not for themselves, until April 10th, because that is when Anna would take the stand. She would talk for the next 7 hours about her life. She went all the way back to her childhood, and she was just rambling. For many of those hours, she was just talking about herself, but she ended up talking about instances in her life where men had disappointed her, had upset her, had abused her, and she had talked about she had once been punched in the stomach when she was pregnant. She had a miscarriage. She had also been sexually assaulted by a male friend, and she had to beat him with a candlestick, and she appeared to really talk in circles about how much of a victim she was, not wanting to get to the point. But finally, after hours, Anna began talking about Stefan. She began with the fact that Stefan had a shoe fetish, that he would make her walk around the apartment with heels so he could take photographs of her, and then he would also want her to step on him with those heels, that he even had a bulletin board of photos of stilettos and had a bumper sticker saying, I love stilettos. She began wearing them all the time, she said, for him. That is when she began to describe just what happened that night in gruesome details, but even more disturbing, she was showing the actions as well. She had the other shoe that was being used in the courtroom, the size 9, 5.5-inch stiletto heel in her hand, and she reenacted what she had done. Using every emotion and facial expression that she could muster, she said Stefan lost it and assaulted her, throwing her over the couch and into the wall, and she plunged that heel into his head. She did this over and over again, and when she was asked why she did not stop doing this, she said that he was holding her leg and the pain wouldn't stop. She claimed that with a stiletto in her hand, she had no idea how badly she was hurting him, that she looked down, her hands were full of blood, and that is when she called 911. She continued to claim it was in self-defense.
I did not murder him. I loved him. And I would never hurt him, despite of what it says or what everyone says. It's just say so. They just want to discredit me, and they just want to make me the person that I'm not.
So when are you due for parole?
In 30 years. It's not the sentence or the time, it's that they have put me as a murderer. They convicted me and said that I murdered him.
When Anna was sentenced to life in prison, she showed no emotion. She only mouthed "I love you" to her family members, and then Stefan's niece spoke to Anna's family, saying that she was sorry for what they had to go through. And then Anna's family got up and they said that they were sorry for Stefan's family as they sobbed, and that is when both families actually hugged in the courtroom. But while in prison, Anna did give an interview agreeing to speak about anything and everything except what all Stefan used to do to abuse her.
He attacked me and I defended myself.
The day of the murder, Trujillo says she and victim Stefan Anderson had been drinking before they both went home to his luxury condo.
I walked in and all of a sudden he just turned around and completely changed. And he was accusing me that I was going to leave.
Then she says he attacked her.
The pain was so excruciating and I was in fear, and all I had was my shoe, so I just took my shoe off and I didn't know what else to do, and I just started to hit him.
Why, if this was self-defense, you struck him some 25 times.
I wasn't counting, or I wasn't intending to hit him. I didn't even know that I was hitting him, or that he was hurt, because of his rage, and he was still so strong. I cannot understand. He had been drinking like 3 days, binge drinking.
He'd attacked her before, she claims, and that's not all.
What did he do to you?
I can't talk.
Anna says she wishes she'd left her boyfriend long before the night that would ultimately be his last.
I feel like I've been cut open, gutted, and my whole life has been a circus and an exhibition, and they've turned me into someone I'm not.
Now, with this case, I think a lot of people go more towards she was not a victim. She was a cold-blooded killer, but I'd love to know what you think. Do you believe she is guilty of murder or a victim who used self-defense? Was she an overdramatic actor or a traumatized woman afraid to lose her life? We talk about these cases of self-defense versus just a gruesome murder, and it's hard to say yes for certain there is no amount of self-defense. Because if, just like she said, if we were in that situation and it really was self-defense, how horrible would that be for the whole world to believe you're a cold-blooded killer when that wasn't the case? I do think with the evidence in this case, it does point to this being a crime of passion, a brutal murder, but I'd love to know what you think. Don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.